The town of Negafushi was super quiet, like really, really quiet. All the lights in all the houses were off. Everyone was tucked into their beds, probably dreaming about boring stuff like paying bills or what to have for breakfast. The moon was the only thing making much of a scene, hanging up there like a big cheesy nightlight. You could probably hear a pin drop if anyone was awake to drop one, but of course, almost everyone was asleep. Almost. Because in Negafushi, there were 4 guys who thought sleep was for, well, everyone else. They had a totally different schedule, you see. A schedule that started when the sun went down and everyone else's day was ending. These 4 friends were Nega, Noga, Naga, and Jiga. Nega was kind of the ringleader, always coming up with the brilliant ideas. Noga usually went along with things, maybe because he didn't want to be left out, or maybe he just didn't think too hard. Naga was the jumpy one, always worried they'd get caught, but he still tagged along anyway, which was kind of weird. And Jiga? Well, Jiga was just Jiga. Usually quiet, but always there, like a shadow that sometimes giggled. They were famous in their own little world for being the opposite of early birds. They were more like night owls, or maybe night bats, if bats got into as much trouble. Their routine was pretty simple, really. While all the normal people were going to school or work, Nega and his crew were fast asleep. They'd conk out when the sun came up and wake up when it started to get dark again. Then, their day, or rather, their night, would begin. They'd meet up, usually feeling super awake while the rest of the town was winding down. They thought they owned the night, like it was their personal playground. Most nights, this just meant wandering around, maybe telling spooky stories or daring each other to do silly things, but tonight felt different. Tonight had a weird kind of energy, like something big was about to happen. So, there they were, the 4 of them, standing under a flickering streetlight. The air was cool, and the only sound was the buzz of that old light and maybe a distant dog barking once or twice. Nega had that look in his eye, the one that meant he was cooking up a plan. Noga was trying to look cool, leaning against the lamppost. Naga was nervously looking over his shoulder, probably imagining monsters, or worse, grown-ups. Jiga was just kicking a loose pebble back and forth, waiting. They were ready for another night of adventure, though their definition of adventure was usually just finding ways to not be bored. Little did they know, this night's adventure was going to be a whole lot more than they bargained for. Their first stop was an old, abandoned-looking house on the edge of town. It wasn't really abandoned, but the people who lived there were away a lot, or so Nega said. Inside, it was dusty and kind of creepy, but they didn't care. This was where they sometimes went to, feel a bit more grown up. Nega pulled out some stuff he'd brought along. They weren't supposed to have it, and it made them feel weird and giggly, and a bit like their brains were floating. It made all their ideas seem like genius ideas, even the really, really dumb ones, which, as you can probably guess, was not a good thing, especially with Nega in charge of the ideas tonight. After a while, with their heads feeling fuzzy and brave, Nega announced his big plan. "Guys," he slurred, a huge grin on his face, "I know what we should do. We should totally get the mayor's lucky t-shirt." The mayor, Mr. Grumbles, was famous for 2 things, being grumpy and always wearing this ridiculous bright orange t-shirt that said Negafushi's #1 fun mayor, even when he was clearly not having fun. The idea was so ridiculous, it sounded amazing to them in their current state. Stealing the mayor's t-shirt? It would be legendary. They'd be heroes, or at least they'd have a really funny story to tell. Naga mumbled something about it being a bad idea, but nobody listened. So off they went, stumbling through the quiet streets towards the mayor's house. It was a pretty big house, with a neat garden. They snuck around the back, trying to be quiet, which was hard when you're trying not to laugh, and you can barely walk straight. Nega tried to jimmy open a window. Just as he was about to give up, it creaked open. Success, or so they thought. But just as Nega was halfway through the window, a light flickered on in the house next door. An old man, the mayor's nosy neighbor, Mr. Henderson, peered out. "Hey, what do you rascals think you're doing?" he yelled, his voice cracking like an old twig. "Panic! This is where things went from oops, bad idea to oh no, really, really bad." They were all super startled, and Nega, trying to scramble back out of the window, knocked over a heavy flower pot that was on the sill. The pot went tumbling, and Mr. Henderson, who had started to come out his door, was right in its path. It hit him, hard. He just sort of crumpled. Nega and his friends froze. They hadn't meant for that to happen, not at all. They were just trying to get a t-shirt. The neighbor wasn't moving. Nega, in his muddled and now terrified state, checked on him. It was bad, really bad. He'd accidentally done the worst thing imaginable. Absolute terror set in. The giggles were gone, replaced by wide eyes and shaky hands. This wasn't funny anymore. This wasn't an adventure. This was a nightmare. What do we do? What do we do? Naga was practically hyperventilating, hopping from one foot to the other like the ground was on fire. Nega, his face pale even in the dim moonlight, tried to think. His drug-addled brain wasn't working too well, but one thought screamed louder than the others. They couldn't leave Mr. Henderson there. They had to hide him. The river, Nega whispered, the words tasting like poison. We have to take him to the river. It seemed like the only option in their panicked minds. Carrying Mr. Henderson was awful. He was heavier than he looked, and they were clumsy and uncoordinated. Noga kept tripping. Jiga was crying silently, and Naga looked like he was about to faint any second. Nega just felt numb, like he was watching himself in a horrible movie. Every shadow seemed to jump out at them. Every rustle of leaves sounded like police sirens. They finally reached the murky, dark river at the edge of Negafushi. It flowed silently, like it was waiting. They were just about to do the unthinkable when a bright light suddenly flashed in their faces. "Hold it right there, boys! What's going on here?" a stern voice boomed. "A police officer!" They froze, caught in the beam of his flashlight, looking like a bunch of guilty gophers. The officer, Officer Miller, was known for being pretty strict, but usually fair. He looked at them, then at the awkward, heavy bundle they were trying to conceal. He probably thought it was stolen goods or something. "What have you got there?" he asked, stepping closer. For a second, nobody moved or said anything. Then, in a moment of pure idiotic desperation, while Officer Miller was focused on what they were carrying, Nega saw his chance. Not a chance to escape exactly, but a chance to do something even dumber, if that was possible. He snatched the officer's notepad and pen from his shirt pocket. Officer Miller was so surprised he actually stumbled back a step. "Hey, what in the..." he started, but by then Nega had shoved the notepad into Jiga's hands and yelled, "Run!" And they did. They just dropped everything. Poor Mr. Henderson, their dignity, everything, and bolted. They ran faster than they'd ever run before, not looking back, a stolen police notepad clutched in Jiga's sweaty hand. Officer Miller was yelling behind them, but his voice got fainter and fainter as they scrambled away into the darkness, their hearts pounding like drums, leaving a scene of absolute chaos and one very confused and now noteless policeman by the river. They ran and ran, not really knowing where they were going, just away. Away from the river, away from Officer Miller, away from what they'd done. Eventually, gasping for breath and utterly exhausted, they found themselves in a familiar neighborhood. It was Noga's street. "My house!" Noga panted. "We can hide at my house." It seemed like the only sanctuary they could think of. They crept into Noga's backyard, then through the unlocked back door. Noga's mom always forgot to lock it. The house was dark and quiet. Everyone was asleep. Perfect. Or so they thought in their exhausted, still slightly muddled state of mind. They needed to hide, and they needed to sleep. Badly. They tiptoed through the house looking for a spot. Nega, still not thinking clearly, spotted a room with the door slightly ajar. "In here," he whispered, and they all piled in. It was Noga's mom's bedroom. Yes, you read that right. In their panic and exhaustion, they had chosen the absolute worst, most terrible hiding spot in the entire universe. Noga's mom's super tidy, very personal bedroom. They didn't even notice the flowery wallpaper or the smell of lavender. They just collapsed onto the floor, onto the rug, one even partly onto her fancy armchair, and fell into a deep, troubled sleep. The stolen mayor's t-shirt, which Nega had somehow managed to grab during the earlier chaos at the mayor's window, tangled amongst them. Morning came, as it always does, even after the weirdest nights. The sun peeked through the curtains of Mrs. Periwinkle's, that was Noga's mom's name, bedroom. She woke up, stretched, and then her eyes opened wide, very wide. There, on her nice clean floor, were 4 filthy snoring boys, one of whom was her son, and there, plain as day, was a ridiculously bright orange t-shirt that looked suspiciously like the one Mayor Grumbles was always wearing. Plus, one of them was clutching a police officer's notepad. Mrs. Periwinkle was not a happy camper. Not at all. She let out a shriek that could probably wake the dead, or at least Mr. Henderson if he wasn't already, well, you know. Nega, Noga, Naga, and Jiga woke up with a jolt to the sight of Noga's mom on the phone, her voice very loud and very angry. "Yes, officer! 4 of them! And they have the mayor's t-shirt! My Noga, I can't believe it!" The next thing they knew, Officer Miller, looking very grim and probably happy to have his notepad back, even if it was a bit crumpled, was there with a couple of other officers. Their wild night was officially over. There were no more brilliant ideas, no more running, just the clinking sound of handcuffs and the very disappointed stare of Noga's mom. It turned out that sleeping through the day and prowling at night doing bad things wasn't such a great life plan after all. Who knew?